see how to split the screen?
I figured it out. We're split. Can you see that we're split?
Mm-mm.
So, hey, everybody. It's Gwen and Sarah. Sarah's home in the midst of the second day of school, so we don't know what's going to happen with her. So we're going to try and give you some information as quickly as we can. And today what we're talking about, we're just doing a little discussion about different types of modalities in taking care of ourselves. And so we all know about chiropractic, and some of us, I know I've gone to an acupuncturist, but Sarah has some really good information because she's been on a journey for, what, Sarah, 10 years to kind of do things differently. And so I'm going to just kind of turn it over to her right now and let her talk a little bit about her things.
Yeah, so I mean, my biggest takeaway, my biggest thing, if you get nothing else out of what I have to share, is do not be afraid to ask questions and do your own research, because there is a lot out there that there's so much information out there that's available on the internet, so many different ways of approaching illness and disease and sickness, and so many different things that we have access to that are maybe new that we never had access to before. And so my story, the way that I started kind of even jumping into natural health in general, was 10 years ago. I was really sick after my oldest daughter was born. And every doctor that I saw basically told me that I was fine. My labs came back fine. My testing looked fine. Everything was, quote, fine, but I felt terrible. And there were really not any good answers given. And so that's when I started diving into just the natural health world. And so for me, what that looked like was doing a lot of research on my own. And there was not nearly as much information out there as there is today. And so there's a lot out there, but doing a lot of research on my own and then kind of thinking critically about what is reasonable, what makes sense, what might be a stretch. And so what I did was I had a doctor that I trusted, a family practice doctor that I trusted, who wasn't necessarily like holistically minded. But what I would do is like do a little bit of research and then have an appointment with him and kind of run some things by him. And he would kind of filter things out and be like, okay, like I could see where maybe that makes sense, or that just sounds like some wackadoodle thing. And, I would take that with a grain of salt, because what I have to remember, and what I would encourage you to remember, is that if you are working with a doctor, they have a bias. Every person, you have a bias. I have a bias. All of us have biases based on our background, our experiences, our training, and all of that. And so I don't think there's anything malicious in that. It's just to remember that the framework from which each one of us is working is what it is. And so a doctor is coming with the framework of having received a traditional American medical training, going through med school here in the United States, which is largely based on, it was initially the pharmaceutical junk companies that established the American Medical Association, and they established the standards of care. And so obviously their natural bent is going to be more towards pharmaceutical interventions. That's fine. Just know that as you're doing some research. And so I just encourage you to ask questions, do research, and then just recognize that just because you may not be familiar with a certain type of care, it doesn't mean that there's not value there. And just because your doctor may not be familiar with a certain type of care, it doesn't mean it's not effective and not valuable. It's just not in their training. And that's an important thing to remember. For me, what I really learned is that there were a couple areas that were just totally lacking in terms of what my specific medical practitioners had to offer. And those were in the areas of holistic health, not really having any kind of background in holistic health, and in diet and the way that food can heal our bodies. And so that was up to me to do a lot of research on my own and then find some people who could help to teach me. And some of those teachers were just books that I read or webinars that I attended, some actual practitioners that I worked with, but being open to digging in and doing some different things is what, for me, ultimately helped me to find healing. So places that I would encourage you to look. One is to just start, a simple Google search will just give you a list of anything that you want. You can start there by Googling. For me, I was, Googling holistic approaches to thyroid issues, holistic approaches to Hashimoto's, whatever your thing is, you can start there and start to work through some things. I would also encourage you to dig through not just like the bloggers that are putting out information, but and bloggers are great, but look for bloggers who are citing actual sources that are reputable, studies, places that have a background in functional medicine. I would encourage you to look for those sorts of sources on the internet. And because really, you know how it is, you can say anything on the internet and that's fine. But those sorts of, do your research yourself and don't be afraid to think outside the box. I would also encourage you that if you are working with a doctor, find a doctor that if you are interested in helping yourself to find healing in a more holistic manner, you have got to find a doctor who is at least open to that. I believe that gone are the days of doctors looking at patients and saying, well, I just know best because I went through medical school. That's not acceptable any longer. We should be asking questions. We should be presenting options and offering up things that we've found, and having a good, healthy dialogue, not a dialogue with our doctors that is condescending, but is one that is openness and recognizing that both I have things to learn from my doctor has things to learn from me, because that's an important piece. Is whatever it is you're dealing with health-wise, you are the expert on your experience. All things aside, you're the one who knows what it feels like the best. I mean, when I was sitting in many doctors' offices having them tell me, you're fine, look at your labs, you're fine. Of course you're tired, you have a baby. Like, they did not, I had many practitioners not understanding what I was feeling, what it felt like to be. Maybe my labs all look normal, then that's fine. Then we need to run some different labs, or we need to ask some different questions. Is it possible that the blood work doesn't necessarily line up with the symptoms that I have? And those are things that you can ask those questions. You can push back and ask those things, obviously in a respectful way that promotes a good, healthy working relationship. But if you don't have a family practitioner that is open to that, find one. Because that's the kind of working relationship you need to have with your doctor. Other things that I would highly recommend if you are interested in addressing your health issues from a holistic perspective is finding what's called a functional medicine practitioner. And so functional medicine docs are doctors. I mean, they can also be nurses, they can be health coaches that have a functional medicine background. And what that means is that they look at the body as a whole and look at how the whole part of the body is able to support healing in parts of the body that you might not recommend, or you might not recognize as being connected. So for example, like an issue with a functional medicine doctor would look at an issue with eczema or rosacea or psoriasis and immediately start helping you to deal with what's going on in your gut. Someone from a conventional medicine background is going to look at your eczema or psoriasis and just give you a topical cream to apply to the skin. And so a functional practitioner is going to look at the holistic, what's happening, why is this happening to the skin? A conventional medicine doctor is going to just treat the problem, not necessarily the root cause. And so functional med doctors are great resources. One thing I will say is that they are largely not going to be covered by your insurance, which is a bummer because our insurance system is set up to basically handle sick care and not necessarily wellness and healthcare. So just be prepared for that. That's why we love having a health savings account. It gives us some freedom and flexibility to be able to use those things for care other than just what our family doctor might be able to provide. So a lot of times you will find sometimes chiropractors have just taken a deep interest in how nutrition affects the body. And so they're great resources. I know my mom has worked with a couple different types of chiropractors who have training in more like physiology and kinesiology beyond just chiropractic care. And so any practitioner that is looking to address the body holistically are worth considering. I would also say, considering with a skeptic's eye, it's also super easy to feel like there's there's so many different options and approaches out there. And so I think that it is it is a wise move to sit down with these practitioners and ask questions. What type of approach do you have? How do, am I just going to come in and you're going to tell me I need to start buying all these supplements from you? Do I really need to do that? What kinds of testing do you offer? Those are questions that I think we have the right and ability to ask in a way that helps to produce care that is well-rounded. And I would really encourage you to do that. I don't know, Mom, I think that's kind of all.
I just want to say something too about just like, sometimes we go to a doctor and then we just stay with that doctor because that's our doctor. And what I would encourage people to do, what I'm doing with my chiropractic care right now, is what I had found was the chiropractor I was going to, there were some things going on that I just felt like I needed something else. And so the easier path is kind of just to keep going back in. You schedule your appointments, you just kind of go back in. And what I'm doing is I've found another person who it feels to me like, for where I am in how I'm feeling, some of the things he talked about made sense. And the first thing he said to me is, put your hands out. And he kind of held my hand in his hand. And he had this little tool that connected energy between the two of us. And he said, we're energy. And he said, when you have blocks in your body, the energy is not flowing, and that's how we heal. And I was just like, that just makes sense to me, because kind of for where I am. But also he said to me, which I think is hilarious now, is I haven't even been on his table yet. And he said to me, yeah, you've got some issues with your posture and your back. He said, you're getting old lady back. I'm like, ah! And so I've been going to a chiropractor for a long time, and I could feel like when I lay on the floor in my yoga class, I feel like a bump on my back. And so my back is starting to kind of bend as I'm 65, right? So things are starting to change. And he said, I can show you some exercises and some ways of just working with that on a daily basis, because this is a daily basis that we have to look at our health. It's not something we can just go to the doctor every 6 months or every year and then everything's going to be fine, especially as we age. Because as we age, there's changes that happen in our body, and our body breaks down, and we have to do things differently. So just be really open to, maybe look into a new chiropractor. If you feel like you're not getting what you want, look into acupuncture. If you feel like that's something that maybe will help you, do some research on it first. And there's other modalities that I don't even know about in the natural, kind of in the natural path, but just see how you're feeling and be your own advocate. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Sarah and I are both trained in Symphony of the Cells, which I know some of you guys have talked to us about that. Some of you came to an event I had at my house where we were doing Symphony of the Cells training. And it's a fabulous protocol program where I don't have my book. I lost my book. Sarah, you went sideways. But I have a list of protocols, and so you can start out, and anybody who comes to me or wants a little mini book of Symphony of the Cells protocols, I have that for you. It's free if you're a customer of mine. But you could actually take a look at symptoms and have a series of oils that you put on your spine and your bottoms of your feet that takes 10 or 15 minutes. It really requires no training other than just Sarah or I teaching you just, okay, here's what you do. Here's how simple it is. And then just having the oils to use for inflammation or for mood things, or there's like 18 different protocols depending on what's going on in your body. You're going to find us talking more about that because we're getting more into that kind of some of the education. There's more resources available for us to educate people on that. But if you have complicated issues, there might be something in the Symphony of the Cells protocol that you could use to help move you through that. People are having amazing success with that. So we'll be talking more about that here and there. We'll be probably sticking some stuff in our groups here and there, and ask questions if you have questions about it. Okay. I think that's all I have. What about you, Sarah?
Sounds
Why
good
did
to
you
me.
go sideways? Did you turn your phone?
No, my phone's been sitting here.
Okay.
Who knows? Technology.
All right. So we're almost to the end of camp. So we hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.